Algebra 1, Lesson 28, Fractional Parts of Numbers and Functional Notation. So this is a good long lesson. Hopefully we'll get through this video as fast as possible. But we're going to start with fractional parts of a number. And we'll be doing problems A, C, and D because they give us all different types of word problems we can get with this type of problem. Now before we solve this type of problem, we need to memorize this equation. This equation is fraction times of equals is. And you'll understand what that means once we get to the problems. So, starting with A, they tell us 4/3 of what number is 64. Now I've copied this down, but I've abbreviated the words what number with capital W, capital N. So to solve this, we're just going to take these values and plug them into our equation as we know them. The fraction in the equation is going to be the fraction, 4/3. So to fill in this equation, I'll substitute f with 4/3. I'm going to multiply that by of. Now, for the of, they say of what number? So they do not know what of is, so we can replace it with an unknown value, like x or n. I'm going to go ahead and use x, because that's what we're pretty used to. And then is 64. So here we have fraction times of equals is, so this times this equals 64. From here we just have an equation we have to solve. To solve this one, we just multiply by the inverse of 4/3 on each side. So we multiply by 3/4 on each side. That'll cross cancel, and then our equation will just have x all alone on this side. From here, 64 over 1 times 3/4. We could multiply 64 by 3, then divide by 4. Or, if you remember your cube roots, you realize that 4 can go into 64. So 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 64 16 times. So then we just have to multiply 16 times 3 instead of 64. Let's see here. 3 times 10 is 30. 3 times 6 is 18. So we take 30 plus 18. That's going to equal 48 over 1, or x equals just 48. So, to solve these equations, or solve these problems, you have to memorize this equation. You cannot solve these if you do not memorize this equation. So you have to memorize fraction times of equals is. Fraction times of equals is. And then you can plug in the missing parts. Now let's go to practice C. They say, what fraction, which I abbreviated with capital W, capital F, the problem reads, what fraction of 60 is 48? So, let's look at our equation up here. The fraction we do not know because they say what fraction. So we'll go ahead and put x for the fraction. The of number, they tell us, is 60. So fraction times 60 is going to equal is. And the is number is 48. So x times 60 equals 48. So here we just have an equation. We can simplify this by dividing each side by 60 because that would become a coefficient of x. And then x is going to equal 48 over 60, which if you know your 12 times tables, that will reduce by 12 to 4 over 5. So x is equal to 4 over 5, and that's what the fraction is. Last one, D. They give us a mixed number. We have 4 1/2 of 220 is what number? So again, plug it into our equation. Fraction times of equals is. Our fraction is 4 1/2, so we have 4 1/2 times 220, our of number, equals is, which is our unknown. We don't know what is, so we'll put an x there. This one's really easy. The x is already by itself, so we just have to multiply 4 1/2 times 220. To do that, I turn this into an improper fraction. That becomes 9 over 2 times 220 over 1. 220 will reduce by 2 to become 110. 9 times 110 is going to equal 990. So x equals 990. Alright, and that does it for the finding a fraction number or fraction of a number problems. Now we have to go over functional notation. So functional notation are going to be these two problems on the practice down here, E and F. They're going to say if the function of x equals x squared minus 3, find the function of negative 1. This is really simple. The simplest way to think of this is we just have to use the plug-in method or the substitution method to solve this. If they want us to find f of negative 1, then all we have to do is take the value of negative 1 and plug it into this equation. It's very similar to the other problems that they were giving you where they said if x squared minus, if we have x squared minus 3 what is the solution if x equals -1? That's essentially what they're saying here. They're just writing it in functional notation. So we just need to learn how to read this notation. So this is read as function of x equals x squared minus 3. Find the function of -1. So all we have to do is plug -1 into x squared minus 3. Alright, so I've kind of got that copied here. So our function here is just going to be the right side of the equal sign. We don't care about this part right here. So instead of writing x squared minus 3, we're going to substitute -1. So we'll have -1 squared minus 3. The -1 squared is just going to become +1 minus 3 equals -2. So the answer to E is just going to be -2. Now let's do it again on F. They give us the function of g of x equals x times parentheses x squared minus 3, and we have to find the function of g of 2. So we're just going to take 2 and plug it in for every value of x. So we'll have 2 times parentheses 2 squared minus 3 end parentheses. So to solve this, 2 squared is just going to become 4. 4 minus 3 will give us 1. So then we just have 2 times 1. And 2 times 1 is just going to equal 2. So the answer to F is just 2.